a little bit here. Hold on, I'm just recording. So, hi, Brian.
Hey,
Brian, for many of you that I don't know if many of you know this, I said that Brian's been with the TDN for many years now, and so we're colleagues. We've been colleagues for quite a while, and Brian has branched out, and he's also started his own racing partnership, Franklin Avenue Equine. So, Brian, first of all, let's welcome you on here, and it's kind of exciting, right? Like first time that we're colleagues, but now here we are.
it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in so long.
I know, I know. That's true. We haven't seen each other in a long time. But Brian, let's start. Let's just get a little like a quick background for for those who may or may not have heard of you. Just give us a little bit of a background. How did you get started in racing, and when you got into you're basically the lead up into what you're doing now.
So kind of got into racing the way a lot of people do. Trips to Saratoga with my dad growing up. Went to college thinking I was going to go to law school, then landed an internship between junior and senior years up in the press box at Saratoga. So kind of threw the law school plans out the window. And first job out of college was with the TDN. I think I've been there, I think I'm going on 11 years now.
Wow.
So moved from Connecticut to New Jersey. Was there for, I guess, about 10 years. Started Franklin Ave Equine in 2017, and now I'm based in Louisville. Moved to Kentucky this past summer.
Okay, Brian, I'm going to try, as you're speaking, I'm going to try to see if I can actually get a couple of the pictures up that you sent me. So while you're speaking, I may be trying to get these pictures up and share the screen, okay? So if you could maybe just talk to us about a few of your horses. I'm going to try to get up the picture of Cronus first, but if you just want to tell us first about your model, like how did Franklin Avenue, first of all, what was the impetus behind Franklin Avenue?
So a big part of it was I had been involved with a couple other partnerships and just had pieces with friends of like pinhook prospects, that kind of thing. And there were elements of it that I wasn't particularly impressed with in terms of other groups, and kind of thought I could maybe do it or try to do it a little better. So that was kind of a big part of it. And I mean, I've always, particularly since joining the TDN, I've always had a big interest in the bloodstock industry and sales, and got really well versed in the sales, having covered them for the TDN. And I kind of wanted to use Franklin Ave as a sort of a proof of concept to build a bloodstock advisory business. So I kind of still do both. I'd say the partnership aspect is definitely the main focus. And that's primarily what I'm doing day in and day out, aside from the TDN. But that was kind of the main impetus for starting it. I think it was right at the beginning of 2017.
And now, how has it changed since then? I guess now so it's been a few years. How did it start, and now what has it become? Like, how has it progressed since then?
Definitely, especially the past year or so, I'd say, definitely increased our quality. I kind of just tried to organically grow and add horses. The more interest we had and more investors we had. And then this year we kind of really shifted and focused on higher quality. I mean, our early purchases, our first horse actually cost $50,000 at a 2-year-old sale. So it was not super cheap, but I mean, we were buying pretty cheap yearlings. We bought one for $17,000 our first year, who we ended up winning with a Keeneland and selling for $200,000. So that was a big score, especially early on, and that kind of helped fund things for a while. We bought one for $5,500, who we did well with, and she ran in a stakes race. So early on, it was kind of just buying what we could and buying what we could afford. I work primarily right now exclusively with Jason Barkley, a young trainer based here in Kentucky. And we kind of were at the same stage when we hooked up. So he had just gone out on his own. He'd previously worked for Wesley Ward and a bunch of other big names. So we kind of caught each other at the right time, and we've sort of built, grown together. He's up to, I think, at least 50 horses now. I think we're at 7 on our official roster right now, which is lower than it has been, but we did sell a few to kind of gear up for the upcoming sales and just kind of continue this process of increasing our quality.
And as in terms of diversification, what are the type of horses you've been going for or you've been looking for, or have there been like, do you find that there's a certain, you're looking for young horses, you're looking for yearlings, 2-year-olds? What have you guys have been really looking for?
We've done pretty much all of it. We've had claiming ventures, we've bought yearlings, bought 2-year-olds, we bought horses of racing age. I'd say primarily we're focused on 2-year-olds and yearlings at this point, and really just, I mean, everyone obviously wants to run stakes races, but we're trying to find those stakes quality horses, and decently priced horses, kind of in the middle range. But and typically we have bought fillies. We've only had a few. We've claimed colts or geldings. Um, Generally, I aim for fillies. The colt on the screen, I think he's the only colt we've ever bought at auction.
Mhm.
But his name is Cronus. He's a Constitution colt. We actually partnered with John Green, who I'm sure everyone's familiar
Mhm.
with,
Yeah.
this group. He's been a huge supporter of ours and really was a big part of us kind of being able to step up and buy better horses. And we really appreciate what he's helped us do. But we bought this colt at the Phasing Mid-Atlantic sale, which was pushed back. I think it was at the end of June this year. Um, he's I did not I he was we didn't expect to spend as much as we did. We paid 175,000 for him. We just all fell in love with him. His breeze it wasn't the fastest breeze. He worked 10-3, which at the Timonium track in Maryland isn't super slow, but it's not blazingly fast either. Um, but just the way he moves, just very, very smooth, effortless. He's not a big horse, but just has a huge stride. Um, and we had talked, Christina, you and I had talked, because he was supposed to run this coming Saturday. We've
Mhm.
called a little audible, but it's actually a good kind of study in patience and all the things that can happen when you have a horse. So, we got him at the end. We got him over the summer. The plan was to run him either at Churchill during their September meet or at Keeneland. We trained him great. It was very close to a race. It was during Keeneland September. I remember shopping the sale with Jason, and his shins. He kind of always battled a little bit of a shin issue, which is, as many of you probably know, is the number one just little thing you have to worry about with 2-year-olds. It's never anything major or almost never anything major, but you just have to be patient with them early. But his shins had gotten to the point where he just needed a little more time. So, then he was so close to race, so we had to back off and wait. And it's tricky if you're based in Kentucky that time of year because, there's sort of a gap. Once Churchill ends, then Turfway starts and we go to Oaklawn. So we were in a tricky spot. So we decided to not run him at Turfway. We were pointing him to opening weekend at Oaklawn. Of course, we draw the 13. We're also eligible. We don't get in. So now a lot of our dreams are dashed, and the perfect season we were all hoping for kind of gets pushed back a little bit. We entered him in the next maiden race. He draws the rail. Would have been Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago. I'm sure everyone knows what the weather's been like in Hot Springs, Arkansas this
Mhm.
year. So that race got canceled. He hasn't been able to train now for 11 days. And, Jason and I had been talking about it, and we decided yesterday morning to just wait for the next race.
Mhm.
Especially, I mean, honestly, he's the best horse we've had. He's done everything right. You never know exactly what they are until you see him in a race, but
Mhm.
we have high hopes for him, and we just want to have him fully ready to show his best. So we're just going to wait. Hopefully, there's a race on the 13th, March 13th. So hopefully that'll be the goal.
Well, trust you, we know about all kinds of, setbacks and all kinds of like trying, as John Green always tells us to be nimble, stay nimble. He always says be nimble because it's true. You just gotta react sometimes. But what have been what would you say is from the moment that you get these horses, what's the business model? How are your partnerships? How are these partnerships structured?
We do it a couple different ways. I'd say our most typical is like with a horse like Cronus, or we have another now 3-year-old filly with John named Quick Money, a bit super like blazing fast Munnings filly. Um, With those, it's typically we'll sell 1% shares. There's a small markup, definitely smaller than the bigger partnerships, and I'll collect expenses for a certain amount of time. It won't be for their whole career, but it'll be generally long enough to get them to a race. And I'll generally allow larger partners who have a little bit more equity or people who've been with us for a while to do monthly expenses, get billed monthly. So people kind of have the option to do both because when you've got a lot of horses, and you've been doing it longer, you typically would rather get a monthly bill. But if you only own 1% and you don't want to get a vet bill every month and get a training bill every month and get a shipping bill and all this stuff, I think it's a lot easier, just to buying at the beginning, and you're still just as much a part as anyone else, and just easier, I think, on everybody.
Oh, so what I'm understanding is you're saying you either have the option. Typically what happens is you just, when you're buying in at the beginning, there's a dollar value based on the horse's
Yeah,
value. And also, I guess you guys have, like, you're estimating the
estimated
training cost.
expenses for, let's say, 6 months or something. So
Hmm.
that's all baked into that initial purchase price.
Hmm.
And
And what
typically
happens?
it'll
Yeah.
be like
Mhm.
maybe 1250 for 1% to maybe 3000, just depending on the cost of the horse.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. And how many people do you have now that are invested in all of your horses,
I think
basically?
probably spread out among all of them, maybe probably over 50, I'd say.
Okay.
Maybe more than that on, if you'd added everything up.
Okay.
We
All
have we
right.
definitely have people who are buying on everything, and I know they're good for their percentage.
Mhm.
Uh, and then obviously people come and go, or there might be a horse that catches their eye, or um,
Mhm.
you know.
Okay. And now you mentioned, if anybody has a question, by the way, as we're going along, please feel free to unmute, and then I'll see that you've unmuted, so you can just jump in and ask Brian a question as we're going along. Um, Brian, you mentioned that so you obviously go to the sales. That's a big part of it. You do spend a lot of time at the sales. What are you looking for? Let's speak specifically about the 2-year-old sales. What are you looking for? What types of horses are you looking for? Physically, pedigree, breeze? Because you even mentioned earlier with Cronus, he wasn't the fastest. He did 10-3, which is actually pretty good. But again, it's always the way they do it, right? So, what are you specifically looking for when you go to these sales?
Well, I think with the 2-year-old sales, it all starts with the breeze. I'm probably more pedigree focused than a typical bloodstock agent. I when it comes to yearlings, I'm very, very. I won't look at every horse. A lot of people will go and look at all, the thousands and thousands of horses at Keeneland September. But there are certain horses I just know I won't buy. Um, some that we obviously can't afford, and some that just pedigrees I don't like or sires I don't like. With the 2-year-olds, really, you just start with the breeze. So, like for the upcoming OBS March sale, which is the first one, I've looked through and looked at every pedigree, but I haven't made any notes. I've made notes for past sales histories, which kind of helps you figure out what horses are going to cost at a 2-year-old sale. You know what the pinhookers bought them for as yearlings. But for 2-year-olds, I think the breeze and the gallop out are pretty much the deciding factor on whether or not you want a horse, or for the most part. So from there, we'll watch all the breezes. I'll get all the gallop out information. I do a grading system for all of them. And that'll cut the catalog down. Maybe we'll be left with 20% of the catalog after that. And then from there, I'm looking at their pedigrees. If it's an Into Mischief that somebody paid 300,000 for as a yearling, and it's an A- on my rating, we're not going to look at it. So it doesn't even get on our list. And there might be horses who I see a pedigree that even though I love the breeze, I either know I just couldn't bring myself to buy it. It's just not the most appealing pedigree. Or, I mean, from what I'm doing, there has to be a certain level of marketability. So, if it was some sire that's not particularly fashionable, I'd have to really love the horse to take a shot. Because, at the end of the day, I do have to sell these horses out and get people excited about them.
Mhm.
And then obviously the physical aspect, that's kind of the final piece once you've narrowed everything down. Um, and then the vetting, which especially at 2-year-old sales can be tricky. So you always have to be prepared to cast a wider net because some of them will get eliminated on the vetting.
You mentioned, so you were talking about the pedigrees. You're also talking about the stallions, the sires, like a horse like Into Mischief. Now, Constitution, you had mentioned Cronus, he's by Constitution. And at the time that you got into this horse, is that one of the things that you'll look at some young stallions that maybe that you like, and maybe that'll give you the price edge that you're able to afford this horse, or might it be a horse that's already a stallion that's already accomplished, but you think that, maybe just market, how can I say it, is not as favorable in the market as a horse like Into Mischief, as a stallion like Into Mischief?
Well, Constitution at that point was definitely no secret. I mean, Tiz the Law was already the leading 3-year-old. It's funny because the year before, Constitution's first 2-year-old sold the previous year, and we loved all their breezes. Jason and I made a point at OBS April to look at every single one of them. We desperately wanted one. And at the time, we really didn't have enough money behind us to buy one. They were selling pretty well. And it was kind of always like, it was frustrating because we loved him. We knew he was going to be good. And he had a huge freshman year and has continued. So we weren't able to get one when we wanted one. And it kind of felt like we missed out. Then this year, obviously having a little more firepower, I do remember saying to Jason when looking through the catalog and after the breezes, saying like, this might be our chance to get a Constitution. There were 3 really nice colts, and we kind of wanted a colt because we had a bunch of fillies, and we kind of wanted to, get that Derby type classic horse, which we haven't really had before. And of the 3, he was the one we fell in love with. It turns out he was the middle of the 3 price wise. And he was, we finally got what we were looking for. But typically, sire wise, we were kind of all over the map. I think at our yearlings, we bought a Mastery and a Classic Empire, who were both freshman sires, kind of middle of the road, middle level, but promising freshman sires. And then we bought a Hard Spun, who's a proven, just all around good sire, and a Dialed In, who's another just proven racehorse sire. So we kind of don't, we'll look at the freshmen, but I typically look more at the mare side anyways, and then decide if the sire is acceptable. So it's kind of the whole package, I guess, pedigree wise.
Okay. Tracy, I see that your mic is open. Did you have a question for us, for Brian?
I do have a question for Brian. So, with all the different ownership opportunities available now, I mean, it's just expanding. I mean, there's different partnerships and different organizations and agencies that are doing all this. What advice would you give to someone who is interested in getting involved in more of an ownership partnership type stake in a horse or horses? What to look for or what to watch out for in some of these different organizations and different opportunities. I mean, obviously price. I mean, some of them are, you got to look at what's in your price range. But other than that, it's like just what differentiates them, or what should someone be looking for, in terms of if getting into this in a more ownership partnership type of way.
I think obviously you mentioned price. I think knowing what you're getting for that price, knowing what the markup is, knowing the structure and what you're going to have to pay for expenses. I think the thing that once you start owning horses, you realize that the expenses are a huge drain and they're pretty tough to overcome. I think that's something you just kind of have to be prepared for, figure out if that's baked into the share price or if it's additional. There's always another bill. Every day I go to the mailbox and there's a bill for something, and something I forgot we did this or whatever it is. So I think that's a big part of it. I think it's really just trying a few maybe and seeing what you like. I know one focus that we have is on communication. Obviously I have a background as a journalist, so I think we try to over communicate as much as possible. We videotape pretty much every single breeze and send a video of that breeze, which I'm not sure a lot of partnerships do. I think that's something that kind of has separated us and has gained us a bit of a following, and it has kept our partners interested and engaged. So I think that's probably something, if that's something you're interested in, I think that's something to look for.
Great question, great answer. Brian, you mentioned like the markup, is this something that's, and again, I'm with everybody else probably here. How do you know, because you mentioned that you have like, you don't have much of a markup on yours, on your particular particular partnership, but how do you know what the markup is? Is it something that is told, like people are informed of this up front, or do you have to do some digging to get to that?
We publish it when we send out like an ownership announcement. It's always right there, and we kind of explain it. I'm not sure every partnership does that. I think you'd have to generally look up the sales history on a horse. So typically you'll know where a horse was purchased. So if you know the horse was purchased at Keeneland September, go to Keeneland sales and look up the sales results, and you can search by the dam's name typically, and you'll see what they paid, and then see what the share price is compared to that.
Okay. Oh, and somebody else just opened up. Larry, Marguerite, I'm not sure which one of you has the question. Hi there.
I just want to tell everybody we got our vaccines today.
Okay. Oh, nice. Good for you. Is this the first one?
Yes, the first
Okay.
one.
Good, good, good. Maybe at some point we'll actually be able to see each other again.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you. I was actually, wait, hold on a second. I was going to ask you something, Brian, as well, in terms of the partnerships and some of the investment. What's the most common question or questions, would you say, from people getting involved for the first time with you guys? Is there anything that seems to be like the most, the biggest question that people have to ask you that really comes up early?
Typically we'll get questions about billing, about like additional expenses. So it'll be, generally if it'll be a horse where the expenses are prepaid for a while, but people will typically ask, what's my next bill going to look like if there is one? I think that's the big thing that people don't always know, what it costs to keep a horse in training. And it's probably on a good month, it'll be about $3,500 a month here in Kentucky. On a month where you're shipping a horse somewhere where there's a more expensive vet bill, it might be $5,000. And there's insurance. There really are a lot of expenses. I think that's something that is maybe a hang up for people, or just something they want to know more about before diving in.
Okay, that's probably a good thing to know off the right up front. And also trainers, you mentioned obviously Jason is a big part of the operation, but I know you've had horses with other trainers before. Is that correct?
Yep. Our first horse was Eddie Pliza. We've had a few, Leo Giamatti, a few other trainers. Really, it just came down to Jason and I working so well together. And a big part of it for me is the communication. And he's on the younger side. He gets it. It's not easy to ask. A lot of trainers won't be able to video every horse, and it's not something that's a priority. And I don't think he does that for every single one of his owners unless they ask, but it's kind of something we've always done together, and he's willing to do that, which is a big part of it for me. And he really is. I think he's kind of starting to take off. I think he's going to be one of those big names in the coming years. And we might have to hire somebody to do the videos. I think when he gets a little bigger, he might be able to do it. But for right now, and when they're in Kentucky, I'm usually taking the videos anyways.
We've got Aaron Yagoda's on this call as well. And Aaron, obviously you've dealt with many trainers as well. I just wanted to bring you in for a second, just to the point that Brian, he was just saying how important it is, or it's become for his group, for his partnership, having that constant, the video, the workouts, and that's important to some people. And that might be like one of the factors where people decide to go here or there. What is your thought on that? Because I know you've also had like several trainers too.
Yeah, and how you doing, Brian? I share John Green as a common friend, and actually, Brian, John sent me your workout report from the 2-year-old sales. It was very impressive. So I don't know if you want to share that with people when after the fact, but he takes really good notes and gives a lot of insightful information. I like communication. Some people just want to know, hey, call me when my horse runs. Other people like to form a game plan. I've had trainers that, I usually say the best way to get a trainer to talk to you is tell him you want to buy a horse, and the last time he speaks to you is after you buy the horse. So you know, I like communication on a day-to-day basis. I have a rapport with Linda and Steve Placeres, but I've had trainers in the past that, you know, you say hello and they're stuck for an answer, and those usually don't last very long with me, even if they do really well. There's plenty of people that communicate a lot better, and you need to form, like Brian says, you need to have a game plan, and the trainer needs to understand where you want to go with your stable. You know, you might want to be a claiming stable, you might want to only race stake horses like Mr. Green, and somewhere in between. You have to get someone that wants to work with you.
Yeah, definitely. And Brian, do you have something to add to that?
No, I agree completely with that. That's exactly what is a big part of it for us. And yeah, I mean, some trainers get it, some trainers don't. There's really just sort of, it's kind of baked into the culture, especially with maybe the old school trainers, where it's just, that's kind of how it was. I think back in, the 70s and 80s, it was just, you really don't talk to your owners. But now with social media and email and text, it's definitely a lot easier.
How has it helped you with, with your work at the TDN and also now doing this? In a way, they seem to complement each other, but maybe people don't realize how much they complement each other in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work, to be honest, but luckily it's, obviously I love it, and I'm kind of, it works well. There's just, I'm kind of doing both things at the same time sometimes, or if I'm going to a sale for the TDN, it gives me another chance to go to a sale and shop, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think you definitely understand stuff like, if a horse gets injured or if a horse has a setback, let's say a big horse, you kind of understand what that means a little more and what the timeline might be like or something like that. And with the sales, I mean, that's kind of how I think that's helped me with the Franklin Ave stuff, is understanding the sales. Because obviously, the TDN is sort of the go-to for sales coverage in the industry and the business aspect of the industry. So you really get down to all the minutia, and you really understand the sales business, which I think has helped a ton with, building the stable up.
Brian actually makes a really good point, and I'm going to do a little shameless plug right now, which I don't typically do for the TDN, but the sales coverage at the TDN, I've been working for them scarily longer than I started before Brian did, several years before that. But the coverage really for the sales is really superior. And it really gets into a lot of details, a lot of behind the scenes buyers, not only the buyers, but the breeders, and a lot of, focus on the pedigree. So Brian makes a really good point. It really does help when you follow and you start seeing these sales and you start following what's going on, to get a look at that. It really does help just, build that knowledge that you have. Brian, what do you think when you started? Because I remember when you first started Franklin Avenue, you and I I think we were still in the office, and you and I would have these stories of, when we start, things that were happening, trying issues with the silks, or, registering this, or some horse, there was an issue with this, or what was one of your biggest challenges that you found early on, and what would you advise new people that want to get into and go into the next level? What are some of the things that you might point out and say, for them to look at?
I think the bookkeeping is a big thing. If you're more passive and you're just owning shares, it's probably not as big of a deal. Obviously, it comes into play when you're filing your taxes, and the Greens can speak to that a little more than I can. But that's a big part of it, is just keeping good records and keeping track of everything. You just really have to be on the ball. Obviously, it helps to have a trainer who's on the ball, but things like you said, like silks and getting licensed, and some states have certain rules about licensing that other states don't. The compact helps with that, but just there are a lot of things you have to kind of know and be aware of, and it's definitely a learning process. And I've definitely come a long way from the start, and now I know what I have to deal with when we get a new horse, things like insurance and all that. Yeah, there's a lot to keep track of, and I think you just kind of have to learn it by experiencing it.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. Actually, I saw John Green. You mentioned John. I think he jumped on. I think he's on the phone. He's on the line right now. John, I don't know if you're there. Hi.
I am, Christina. I
Okay.
didn't want to steal any of Brian's thunder. I just wanted to be a fly on the wall because he's so good at what he does.
You know, we were just talking, Aaron mentioned you, Brian mentioned you. So we were just talking about like some of the challenges, and Brian just mentioned the bookkeeping, which I can attest to that. We've had also the assistance of the Greens, of the Green Group. So we've been like lucky in that regard, but still that is one of the, it is challenging if you're going to, especially if you're going to conduct this as a business and you want to make sure you keep on top of everything. The bookkeeping, that's a big thing, John.
No question about it. And the only thing that's harder than actually keeping abreast of all the bookkeeping and all the things that Brian mentioned is, is just trying to keep up with Aaron Yagoda, because he's a full-time job. So anything above and beyond that is just gravy. But I can attest to, Christina, we're fortunate enough to be in a lot of partnerships and to work with a lot of great people in the industry. And I personally invested some of my own money with Brian. And with his group at Franklin Equine, just because of the way that they communicate, the way that they're very focused on details, and it really has impressed me. And Brian's, we started working together, and then we became friends. In addition to it, because he's just a very straightforward and honest and knowledgeable guy. And as far as partnerships go, and again, we deal with a lot of them. I can honestly attest to the fact that Brian's the only one that I put my own money into. That's how highly I think of him.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, John.
Okay. I have to, I mean, we've been working for, especially over the last, if the members have noticed, we've started trying to introduce different partnerships here, just so people can kind of get a feel for it. And it's just what Brian was saying, a minute ago, or just a few moments ago. It's really what your comfort level is, what you're looking for. Even Adam mentioned this earlier, just a little bit earlier on the call. So that's why we're trying to introduce different partnerships on here, so people can get to get a look and see, maybe start getting a feel for what they like and what's important. But I think that was a great point, John, in terms of what, just basically what you said and what you said about Brian. And because Brian was talking about the communication, that seems to be very popular with his group.
Yeah, the communication, and also, guys, we've had other people on, on these calls before, and they talk about, the amount of time that you spend at the sale looking at horses and kind of kicking tires and talking to people and conducting all your due diligence. And I think Liz Crow mentioned when she was on a few weeks ago, just how much effort goes into it. And it's unnoticed. Like, we go to the races and our horse is ready to run and we watch the horse run. But there's so much time and effort that goes into unearthing that horse at a sale, especially. And before I even invested in anything with Brian, he was sending me copious notes of all these horses at the Under Tack show, at the Breeze show in Florida. And it blew me away, just the detail and the amount of information that was there, and important information, not just, the horse went 2 furlongs in this time. It was, how did he gallop out? How did he sound? How did he look on the racetrack? Were they washed out or were they on their toes? Was there something that freaked the horse out that maybe made it so it didn't breeze to the best of its ability? All of those notes were included in the summaries next to the horse's name and breeding and time. And it was those extra notes that really, it encouraged me to go ahead and actually buy a piece of a couple of horses. And I think, Brian, not to steal your thunder, I don't know if you said this before, but I think that because of that, you were able to go out and buy better bred and kind of more expensive horses, a Munnings and a Constitution, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was singing your praises earlier. You've been a big part of our expansion and our increase in quality. And it's nice to be able to actually buy the horse that you really love. I can bring back to past sales when it's maybe not your A horse, it's your 50th favorite horse, but it's the one you can afford. So it's nice. There's definitely a price range where you can get to and really get what you like, and really bet on yourself and bet on your opinions of a horse.
And Brian, are your plans to go back down to a couple of the big 2-year-old sales right now?
Yeah, we're gearing up for every East Coast sale we'll have a presence at, and we've started to look at the catalogs for the first two.
So what's the next one, Brian, what's the next one that comes up?
March is the first one. It's in like mid-March. So we'll start there, and then it's basic Gulfstream, and then OBS April, and then Atlantic at basic, and then OBS June.
Okay.
You know, the TDN, after every sale day, they have a little recap for those people that go on the website for TDN. You can watch those, and they give you like a minute or 2-minute recap. They interview maybe a head top buyer, or they show the most expensive horse, and it's a good way to learn about being the sale without being there. Also, John and Brian and a couple of the guys, they have this weekly podcast. I mean, last week or the week before, they had Travis Tigert from the USADA, and that was a great interview too. And Brian wasn't on that one, but that's a great weekly thing for like, an hour a week just to see what's going on in the industry, to get on the TDN website. So you could do that and the sale thing, and you're good way to get a quick education without being there.
Definitely. Does anybody else have a question for Brian? Okay, I think I have a couple. Hold on a second. 1 second. Kyle, if you want to go, I also see you, Larry and Marguerite. We'll let Kyle go, and then we'll come straight to you.
Yeah, to add on to what Aaron just said, and John might be too much of a gentleman to mention it. The last couple of podcasts that he's done, they've just been on fire. Been thinking about some of the topics from last week, literally all week. They had Alex Waldrop on there, and he was just talking about different ways to get racing, more in the public eye. And he mentioned more of a tie into the sportsbook platforms that exist and have been getting, legalized in more and more states every year. So Brian, as a journalist, have you seen news that comes across the wire about some of those relationships, or are people chattering about how, the mechanics of that happening?
The fixed odds wagering.
Yeah, specifically.
It's definitely, I think we're a ways away from it really getting widely accepted. I probably don't have any other information more than you have, but certain states are starting to finally look at it seriously. I was pretty heavily involved with the exchange wagering, the Betfair exchange in New Jersey. I kind of thought I loved betting on it. I ended up kind of being, I guess maybe like the spokesperson for it. I would do the analysis for it. And I really thought that would take off, and it never did. They had some liquidity issues, and it was tough. When you only have one state to pull from, wagering wise, it's tough to really survive. So I hope that the fixed odds is a little more popular than that, but they are kind of similar. So we'll see how that goes.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Larry, Marguerite, I'm not sure which one of you wants to ask the question.
Hey. My question is, we obviously have a wide range of people in this club of varying financial means. And what I'm trying to figure out is, what is a reasonable amount of money? We've never really talked about this. We've talked about percentages, 25% ownership, etc. But how much money is a reasonable amount of money to invest in horse racing? I think I worry about Kyle personally. Like, I'm just saying, we're well heeled. We could spend a lot of money and it wouldn't hurt us, but other people might lose a lot of money, and it could affect their long-term livelihood. Do you have any?
Well, he already cut his hair, Kyle. He's halfway there. That probably set him back a lot.
I would say, you definitely have to find your comfort level, and definitely it's got to be discretionary income. You have to really plan to lose it and then some, typically. So I don't think you ever want to stretch yourself too thin. A lot of people in the industry probably do stretch themselves too thin, from the top all the way down. But I think if you're, a more passive investor in racing partnerships, think you just got to find your comfort level. And I think you sort of build up a tolerance over time. I know a lot of our guys who got in, they bought a share in a horse, their first horse.
I mean, but
they're typically
what are
five.
we talking? Are we talking $5,000, $10,000, $20,000? When do you say enough is enough?
Well, typically our share price is, between 1,000 and 3,000 or so.
Okay, so that's not going to kill you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have people who might own 10% of a horse or more of a horse, but they're typically more experienced or obviously, have the money to do it. But
Okay.
yeah, we're kind of in the middle, I'd say. We're not, we're sort of somewhere in between the micro share, my racehorse business model of, own a very, very, very small percentage of a horse for not a lot of money and kind of get the excitement of it. And
so is Kyle going to be okay?
I don't know for sure. I'd have to talk to him longer, but I'm sure he seems like a smart guy. He seems on top of things, I'm sure.
Yeah. Let's see. I think Shane, is that you? Did you open up your mic?
I did. So I have a quick question, but for the money one, I'm always going to go back to something that I think Aaron said, and I think he said it was from his grandfather. You bet your betting money, you don't bet your eating money. So I think it's just what you can afford to lose. But I have a question for Brian is seeing how you've grown in the past couple of years from the, I don't want to say cheaper horses, but to where you're at now, what do you think is your 5-year plan? What do you think that this partnership or the type of horses you have in 5 years from now?
I think we're right in the sweet spot in terms of average price per horse. I don't think you need to overspend. Typically, we're spending now on the low end. In the past year, the cheapest horse we bought is $25,000. Most is $175,000. I think you kind of want to be in that $50 to $150 range, maybe for a yearling, and then maybe $75 to $200 for a 2-year-old. I think that really is the sweet spot. I think it kind of gives you your best chance to get a stakes level horse and not overpay and just outlay a ton of capital on one horse. So from that perspective, for me, I'd really just like to have more horses and more horses of that quality and just sort of build up the stable and obviously have horses in stakes races and kind of have that national presence. But I think we are kind of at the right spot now from where we were just in terms of quality of the horse. And I think we have the roster that we have going into this year is definitely unlike anything we've had in the past. And, I don't want to overstate it or, set goals that are too high, but I'd be pretty disappointed if a few of these didn't kind of pan out and be, legitimate stakes types of horses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Shane. Stephen, I think I saw you. My screen had shifted a little bit. Sorry, I think you might have been waiting for a couple of minutes. Stephen, your mic is up.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brian. Stephen Muller. Thank you so much for your time today. Very informative. Couple quick questions. First of all, Franklin Avenue, is that in Franklin Avenue as in Garden City?
No, it's actually Hartford, Connecticut. It's kind of a nod to where my dad grew up. And, when I started, when we were raising money for the first horse, it was a lot of local people, family, friends, kids I went to high school with that I reconnected with. So it was kind of just a little, nod to where I'm from.
Got it. Thank you. And are any of your horses New York based, or will they be running on the NYRA circuit?
We have had some in the past based in New York. Don't have any currently. We did actually just have a full Central Banker filly out of the first horse we ever bought. So she was our first winner. Her name is Dawn Lightning by the Factor. She was eventually claimed away from us, and I obviously was always following along very closely and kind of always had the intention to get her back at the end of her career. And she got a decent little pedigree, definitely worthy of being bred in New York. So when the time was right, we claimed her back, bred her to Central Banker, and she just had her first foal. So that foal will be syndicated at some point, most likely. I'm trying to. It's probably too early.
Anything based in New York? Any horses?
Yeah, for New York bred. Yeah, that horse will definitely be just because she's a New York bred,
Yeah.
definitely be based in New York.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Good thing.
Great. Thank you. Great questions. Does anybody else have a question? It's been good. A lot of questions coming our Brian's way. But Brian, just on a parting note, what are you thinking about looking? So we're going to go to the 2-year-old sales. Are you guys going to do yearling sales this year, or just you're going to stick with the 2-year-old sales, or what's the plan for this year?
I think we've got 4 2-year-olds right now, all fillies. I'd like to add a few to that and fill out this year's crop. So we'll probably buy, I'd say maybe 1 to 3. It's really all just depending on how much interest we have. We're at the point now where we're selling out very quickly on horses. And sometimes we're able to go buy a second one, or, we're finally at the point where we're turning people away. So it really just depends on what the demand is like. I think these sales are going to be pretty decent buying opportunities just with what's going on in the world still. But we'll definitely be back to shopping the yearling sales. We do both. A little bit of horses of racing age. I think that's a tough market unless you're really willing to spend serious money. So we haven't done a ton of that. We've done a little bit, but we'll have opportunities all year long.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. And what's your website, Brian, if people want more information just to check you out?
Yep, FranklinAveEquine.com. And there's a little sign up for getting onto our mailing list. So when we announce a new opportunity, you can just sign up there and be on the lookout.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, this has been a great hour and a half, really a lot of information. I've recorded everything. I'm going to send it. I'm going to send this on. Both interviews, both will be sent on to all the members, so you guys can watch it again if you want. Thank you, Brian. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Okay. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. We're going to be signing off. Thank you for logging on. And again, this was a really good one. We got a lot of information here. So if you have any more questions, either for Adam or Brian, just feel free to email them to the Empire Racing Club email, and I'll send it along to them so we can get those answers for you. But thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great evening.